the players, many times, like there can be a structure that's already been laid out for the song, but the players will sit there and go, this could really use an intro or a better intro, or this needs a bridge. What do we do? And the band will come up with these things, and because it's amazing how many songs are so skeletal when the band arrives, and you leave with this incredible arrangement. And it was nobody but the band that did that, and that's the nature of what, as a studio player, you do. You're not just hired to sit there with your bass and play these notes. You're listening to everybody's parts and coming up with this, and you're listening to the song to think, what could this use? And a lot of times we'll cut it once and we all go gather in the control room, and then at that point we discuss it and go, this is good, but it really needs, or even to the point where you look at the artist and you go, you want to try this down a half step, because it seems like you're at the top of your range, and it might be a nicer vocal.
Now, is that something you would suggest?
Yeah,
okay.
I would throw it out there.
Okay.
And they might, say, we're good here, or they'd say, well, let's try it, because if you got guys that are really good, they can transpose on the spot.
Tune the drums down a half step.
Yeah, no, I'm only talking about the musicians. Oh, I'll tell you a great moment like that. We were on Phil Collins's, it must have been on the first Final Farewell tour back around 2004. And he had I think it was Tarzan had just come out, and he had done the music for Tarzan.
Yep.
And we did The View. Now, you do those shows, and that's the crack of dawn. I mean, most people watch these shows and they go, when you're doing the Today Show and stuff, you're down there at 5 a.m. and stuff. It's really sucks. Well, it was Chester and Daryl and Brad Cole and myself with Phil, and we were going to do a song from Tarzan. And crack of dawn, and Phil goes, I'm really, middle of the tour, he's going, man, I'm really suffering a little bit today. Could you guys take this down a whole step for me? And so this is 5 minutes before showtime.
Sure.
So we gather in the corner, and we're working on this. And it was it wasn't just a pop tune.
Sure.
This was like a score to the thing, and we do it, and it came off perfectly. Yeah. And when the thing's over, he looked at us and he said, if this had been Genesis, we'd have had to go into rehearsal for a month. Because those guys, they don't think like this.
Sure.
They come up. Tony Banks could have probably hit a transpose thing on the keyboard or something, but Rutherford would. They're brilliant at what they do.
Sure.
But their position is defined, and we're the guys that are. I always tell people, I said, everything I do is etched in mud. Because you got to be ready for anything. You just don't know what's going to happen, and that to me is the exhilarating part of this job, is that just grab your bootstraps and hanging by your cuticles on the precipice every day. And some days you walk out and you go, I just sucked. I just hate it. Because you're not happy with your performance. Now you're not going to say to them, I'm sorry I sucked today, because they're sitting there going, I love what you played.
Right.
But your own, thing that what you can do and can't do. You can edit all this crap out that's the beauty of what you do as compared to my videos, which are like one shot. I got hired to do an album for a guy named Steve Kurywchak. This was just kind of before Harry Connick, but this guy's a great singer, piano player in that kind of jazz vein.
Yeah.
And Ahmet Erdogan was going to produce it.
Okay.
And so we go in the studio, and Ahmet goes, I'd really like upright on this. And I go, man, I'm sorry, but I started on upright, but I went so many years where nobody ever gave an upright call. So I'm not a doubler on this stuff. When the time would come, I'd say, call, so-and-so, they'd eat this stuff for breakfast. But I said, I have a Washburn AB45 bass that I hated. It was big acoustic bass. And then I pulled the frets out, and it said thank you and came to life. And it's an incredible bass, and I've got black nylon strings on it, so it sounds great. I said, let's try this and see. And as soon as he heard it, he went, great. It sounds upright, but it's different enough for this. So great. Yeah. So we cut everything, but there were 2 tracks left, and I just went, this really should be upright on this. So I said, and John Patitucci still lived in L.A. at that point. So I said, let me call John and have him come down. I said, my clock's off, but I want to hang out. And John was available. So he came and did these 2 tracks, and it was really great. then we got to, I was playing with Judith Owen in Boston. And Steve Bailey and Victor Wooten came to the show. And they said, what are you doing tomorrow? I said, well, we're going to New York. We got a day off. They said, can you stick around? We could set up a master class at Berkeley for you tomorrow. I said, yeah, well, sure, I guess so. I go in, there's like 200 people in this room, and I'm totally ill-prepared. I haven't done any. And I'm going, oh, fuck. So I tell the story about what I think is the most critical thing about a project is the project. It's not your ego. If you're not the right cat for the thing, Jeff used to do that all to Picaro. He said all the time, he said, no, call Keltner. No, Keltner's, he's the perfect guy for it. So I'm telling this whole story, and then I say, are there any questions? And this guy in the back raises his hand, and they go, yeah, what is it? And he goes, that was my album, and it was the guy, Steve Kowalczyk, and he now goes by Steve Santoro. And it was just so funny.
That's amazing.
And he was teaching at Berkeley at that point. So, I mean, it's just this whole business. To me, it's like every day, you don't know what the hell you're getting into, and you just kind of go in, and kind of like one of my mantras, I was always like, just don't suck. Please don't suck. When you're going. And I was talking to somebody yesterday about it, too. I did a project for a girl from South Africa, but she lived in Austria. And it was 12 songs. I was going to be playing on all 12, and there were 3 different drummers that were going to play on it. It was Thomas Lang, Simon Phillips, and Charlie Watts.
Okay.
And Charlie, we're all sitting in the studio, and Charlie goes, I'm happy to do this if I can be first. Because he didn't want to follow either of those guys.
Right.
And I filmed him in there playing and stuff, and he was the best hang. But he spent the whole week there. He just hung out every day, wanted to hear everybody's playing.
That's
and
so
all.
cool.
He was the best cat.
Oh,
and
man.
at one point, when they were changing his drum heads, and I said, please sign a drum. So he writes, dearly, blah, 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 whatever he writes. Charlie Watts hands it, and then he grabs it back, and he goes, he writes Rolling Stones. He said, just in case you forget. I said, Charlie, I don't think I'm going to forget this, Mo. And as much as I love playing with those other guys, what a joy it was.
Oh,
I mean,
gosh.
I've gotten to play with Charlie Watts and Ringo now. It's like done.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's a career right there.
I mean, there's those moments that happen where you kind of go, if this was the last moment in my career, it's really good. We used to do these, there was 2 DJs in LA, Mark and Brian, and we would do their Christmas show every year, which was the craziest thing imaginable. And we'd be at the Hollywood Palladium at like 5 a.m., and we had it would be like Keltner or Jeff, we'd have Tower Power horns, we'd have like this amazing band, and they'd bring in all these people. And on this one show, I got to do White Christmas with Donald O'Connor and the Christmas song with Mel Torme. Wow. And I went in the dressing room, and they were both sitting there. I said, if I die on the way home, it's okay. It's there are those kind of moments where you those pinch yourself. Like I did 2 albums with Andy Griffith.
Wow.
And I'm sitting in the studio with Andy, and I'm just going,
wow.
Andy Griffith, you're trying to be cool, but you're
That's
fanboying
amazing.
yourself into it. And the funniest thing out of that was it was after Matlock and all that stuff. And he ended up winning a Grammy for Gospel Album of the Year for what we did. Best thing is he's sitting there, and he's got this gorgeous white hair. And he says, who would have thought I'd still have all this white hair and Opie'd be bald? It was one of those moments where we all snot running out of your nose, and you're dying laughing so hard. And he was, and then I get home, after that, I get home like once a week, and my message light would be beeping, and I'd pick it up and go, hey, Lee, Andy here down in North Carolina, just checking in, see how you're doing.
Wow.
And you just kind of go, it was worth everything just for that.
That's amazing.
Those little nuggets in your life that are really, precious.
I want to talk about all these great drummers that you've played with.
Yeah.
You mentioned Jeff Beccaro. Let's talk about Jeff.
There are so many great drummers in Los Angeles, and all of them have a unique quality about them. Jeff embodied all of them in one guy. I probably did several hundred albums with Jeff over that brief life that he had.
Yeah.
Every time I'd walk in the studio and I'd see his case sitting there, I'd go, yeah. And I've got date books that go back, and all it says is Jeff on the date. If I knew he was the drummer, I didn't care who the artist was or anything. I loved Jeff. He was a dear, dear friend, but also just the energy that this guy brought. I mean, his vitality when he'd be standing there listening to a playback. He was like a whirling dervish. His body was in motion all the time. I treasure everything I got to do with him. But there were so many, like Carlos Vega, Ed Green. The funniest thing with Ed Green was when I was studying piano, he and I were talking one day about our upbringings. And I said, yeah, studied piano. I said, I went through a bunch of teachers, finally ended up with a great teacher, but I was too far gone at that point. Her name was Debbie Green. And he goes, that's my mom.
Oh, my gosh.
And probably when I was 12 years old, he was probably in the house when I
Right.
was in the garage taking my piano lessons. And years later, there we are working together. But the Keltners, I spent so much time with Jim Gordon back in the day. And then, one of the greatest blessings was spending so many years with Phil Collins. That's the thing that...
Talk about how great of a drummer Phil
The thing is,
Phil
if you were walking down the street and met Phil Collins, you didn't know who he was or anything, and you got into a conversation and you said, so what do? He would go, I'm a drummer. Not singer, not writer, not anything else. He felt that his calling was as a drummer, and his pocket was so deep. And people go, oh, it's just simple stuff. Go listen to Brand X and check out what... the guy...
Amazing.
Seriously gifted drummer.
Yes.
But there are, I think, when I've talked to people in the past, I've always felt that one of my greatest gifts in this business has been the drummers I've gotten to play with.